Hello, I'm Amanda Hocking, and I am recording another video with writing advice and other fun stuff. But this time I am back on Wednesday. I think this is the second week in a row that I'm getting it on time, and so I think, things are going quite well for me when that works out. I'm also back into my office, as you can see. My office is still messy outside of the camera, but I've made some, big strides in here, so it's better than it was for sure. I also decided to rearrange my shelves. I originally had, see these books here on this shelf are all the ones that I've written, and I originally had them on this shelf, but I didn't like having my books so front and center. I don't know, I wanted stuff, books that I like. But they're still here, so you can still see them. I don't know, I just think they're they're a little, lower. I don't know. But so this book, and before I go too much into describing what this is, I just want you guys to know that this right here is a jar that has an electric butterfly in it. And I want to point out that it's an electric, that it just runs on batteries, and it's not a real butterfly, because I posted a video of this a long time ago, and someone was so offended that I had a butterfly in a jar and that I should let it out. And I don't have a butterfly in a jar. This is not a living thing, but it is one of my favorite possessions. I love it because it really looks like there's an actual butterfly in there, which I think is very cool because I like butterflies, but I don't like harming them, and this gives me the best of both worlds. So otherwise, I consider this to be my big inspiration shelf, and it has a lot of books by Brian Froud, it's a lot of art books, and books about Jim Henson or by Jim Henson, because I think those are my biggest creative inspirations for things. I think it was one of my biggest inspirations for the Trill series and the Water Song series, those two especially, and now especially the Seven Fallen Hearts. That one it's just, I know I've been talking about it and you're like, hurry up, come out with the second book, which is a totally reasonable thing to say, and I have been working on it. I just want it to be just right, because I'm really, I love this, and I want you guys to love it as much as I do, and so I want it to be the best that it can be. So that's kind of where I'm at, but it's going, like I said, it's going so well in this world. I've just been having fun, and I just get to put creatures into it in a way that I was weirdly holding myself back about in the past, and I've just flung myself completely into the world, and I'm just doing whatever feels right. I mean, I'm thinking about plotting and everything like that too, but I'm really I want it to have fun, and I'm not, I don't know how to explain it, because I don't want you guys to think that I'm just throwing whatever and, hoping it sticks. So there's a lot of thought and forethought going into this and trying to make sure that it's a cohesive world. But it's also just something that I sometimes pull myself back. I'm like, well, that's too much. You can't have that in there. And this one, there really is nothing that's too much for me. It's all, yeah, let's see if we can do that. I mean, the mantra for this is really there's that line from Inception, and it's my favorite line, and I even have pictures of it on my other wall.
Mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling.
And you mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling. And that is definitely my thing, and I have to remind myself of that too, though, because I am my own worst enemy for sure. I am the biggest thing that stands in my way 9 times out of 10, honestly. And so I'm really just trying to move out of the way and let myself go in this, and so it's so fun. I think you guys are gonna have fun. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, because I keep kind of talking a little bit, it is the Seven Fallen Hearts series. The first book, Virtue, is out now, and it's a re-release, and I've done other posts about it and stuff if you're more curious. But this is Virtue, and it is in paperback and ebook. Eventually I would like to have it in audiobook, but it's not yet. My old Virtue, I believe, is, but I've re-released it, and I've talked about it in other videos, so you can go check those videos out or read those posts. I'll make sure to have links below, and if I can figure out how to do it, I'll even have links in this video. So if links are possible, they'll be here. And if they're not, go to my website. But so I'll have links below and stuff too, where you can go and check out more when I explain the re-release, just because I don't want to keep explaining that part. And this week, I think I'm just going to talk about inspiration, finding inspiration, and where it comes from and what to do with it once you found it. And I think, I mean, part of it is, I did my inspiration shelf here, but I've also been thinking a lot about that, why do we tell stories? And I've really changed my whole opinion about why we tell stories over the past 10 years of my writing career and everything like that. And I feel one thing that I think about being a writer, especially in the way that writing is done now, I mean, especially before self-publishing, but even with self-publishing, there is this sense of scarcity, because everyone only has so much time to read, and you're now competing with so many other things, but the life is finite, free time is finite, shelf space is finite, and so there's this scarcity, there's we gotta compete because we all need to get on the shelf space, and that is a real fear and drive and concern. I mean, things, anytime there's a non-unlimited resource and people are like vying to get it, there's going to be this competition sense. And I think initially I did feel that more because, especially, when I was trying to get published and everything, like, I am competing. I do want to stand out. And you get like this kind of us versus them mentality, which I don't think is good, and I do not recommend doing it. I'm really past that now, fortunately. But the biggest thing that was, is I changed, the way I viewed storytelling changed. And I think that there's something so beautiful about storytelling. It is one of our oldest art forms that we have, and so much we don't think of it as an art form. And it's really easy to be dismissive of writing, especially fiction that focuses on kissing or fantasy. It's really, I mean, yeah, the whole like Tolkien up in steam and stuff like that. But then there's also so many other authors, and even then people can still be disparaging. I just saw a tweet last week that was totally, I mean, I know it was for clicks and everything, but that said, how can anyone read fiction in this time? Like, only nonfiction is a valid thing to read. And that's totally, like, I love nonfiction books, don't get me wrong, but I also love fiction. Fiction is a way to tell things that we would be unable to tell. And I think it gives, because there are things that you can't understand and you can't experience, and fiction gives us this way to see it from a different perspective, in a way to see it in a different way, into a way to have different experiences that we'll never actually be able to truly have. And just because you've read a book, obviously I'm not trying to say like because I've read books with, characters that are dramatically different than me, they know exactly what it's like to be that kind of person, like whether it be a high-powered business person or a serial killer or, anything in between. Anything in between. I don't know those two things, but or a vampire hunter, whatever it is. Like, I'm obviously, but see, vampire hunting, like, it's not a real career, but the things that they go through are real. If the emotions and things don't resonate to a reader in real life, it's not going to play. You know what I mean? And that's a huge thing for most people, is being able to connect with it. And that's what storytelling ultimately is. It's a way to connect, to share, to feel. And it's so cool. The things that storytelling do is amazing. Humans are one of the only animals that can tell stories, and especially stories with the complexity that they have. I mean, I believe that Coco the gorilla could tell some basic stories, and there was an African gray parrot who they believed who could tell some stories and stuff like that. But even then, the stories were very simplistic. It was very much more repetition from their characters. And I'm not trying to diminish the intelligence of these animals. These animals are incredibly, incredibly intelligent. And I think that even animals who aren't capable of telling stories still have quite a bit of intelligence, and a lot to see. Just because, we're not measuring them on their metric for linguistics doesn't mean that they don't have, things to offer. But I think that storytelling is the most important thing. And because even now, when you see it, the way the information is conveyed now, it's always down to a story, to a snippet. It's trying to, because what they're teaching you tropes in a way so that they can just in a quick line get the whole story across to you, and you know what it is. Like, everyone has become, there's this thing that's known as an elevator pitch, and it's primarily, I think, I talked about it as like in screenplays, but it's with books too, or any story that you're pitching, that you're trying to sell, or even anything beyond that. But where you get in an elevator with someone who you want to pitch it to, and you've only got between the elevator ride to do it. So it has to be a very short pitch. You want it just to be a few sentences that can tell them exactly what your story is and why you should be the one to do it. And that is like a terrifying impossibility. I'm telling you, like, as an author, writing a synopsis or creating an elevator pitch is so much harder than writing a book. It really is. It is so hard, because you have to really get down to what the marrow of your story is, and what the hook is, and what your voice is, and get that all out in a matter of, 3 to 5 sentences if possible. Sometimes 20 to 50, which isn't even better. Like, the more sentences almost makes it more convoluted, because then you're like, well, I have to add more than just this. But anyway, going on a tirade about synopsises is pretty common for me. But the real point of it is that you are conveying information. Everything is a story. We're constantly telling stories about ourselves, to ourselves. I mean, these stories are just essential to every building block of everything, and everybody should be telling their story. I think it is so important, and I no longer abide by the idea of scarcity. And I mean, there is scarcity, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't tell your story. I mean, there's so many people on Earth, and so many times the same stories get picked. And there's a variety of reasons why they do, why we have the same storytellers. Some things are because we like tropes. That is true. Some of it is a natural, organic draw towards certain tropes. Like the chosen one hero is a very common trope. It's one of the oldest, storytelling things, and people like it. People like it. People it can get overdone, and you've got all these roundabout things about it, but it's one of those things that people like. And every story can be broken down into basic principles too, which is the thing, man versus nature, etc., etc. I think there's 7 or 9 or 11. I don't know. I'm not remembering them off the top of my head. Anyway, but so you have the same basic. You have all those same basic story buildings, and so that's just a really simplistic way of saying things. But all of those stories can mean so many different things depending on how they're told, and depending on who's telling them, and depending on who you decide the main character is. And then you can change it by the genre and what that means, but all of them can convey so much depth and information. And everything is conveying information, and that's the thing. If you think that you're not, you still are, you just don't know what you're telling people, which is also more alarming. You need to know what it is that you're telling people. You're telling this story for a reason, and why? Because, even if you're like, well, I just like mysteries, so I want to write a mystery. And I get it, I like reading mysteries, and mysteries are one of the genres that can be more, a lot of genres are formulaic. That's exactly how they get to be in a genre, because they follow the formula of that genre. So that's not a criticism at all when I say that. Especially not for this, but so mysteries follow a certain formula, but there's still so many different ways to do it. You can still, even Agatha Christie, the reason she chose Miss Marple to be the detective who solves these murders and the crimes it says something about who she is and her life, and there's these snapshots about life that you can really see through there. And part of it is, for me, is one of my favorite shows is Law and Order. It's boring and basic. I'm boring and basic. I've been watching it like my whole life. I just love Law and Order. But my absolute favorite part of the show is the opening before the credits, because the opening scene is like 2 to 5 minutes snippet of random New Yorkers discovering the dead body or the missing person. Sometimes, usually it's a dead body, but sometimes it's a missing person, and it's just like you'll see a couple having a fight, and then all of a sudden they'll just stumble across the body, and they've got nothing to do with the rest of the story, oftentimes. Not all the times, but oftentimes. And I love it because it's this little snapshot, and it says so much about New York and the people who are writing it and the attitudes of the world at the time of filming. And it's fascinating because the show is now, they had like the hiatus, and there's also the spin-offs, and I'm not going to go into all of that, but for the 30 years, you know what I mean? So you can see the little snapshots, and even the way that men and women talk to each other and talk about each other. You get this little clip, this little tiny glimpse of course, it's not 100% real life. Nothing is, that's the point, but it's a little snapshot of how some things were in the 90s. And it's kind of cool to see, and I love that, and so your stories are still doing that. They're still telling things that are reflecting things about your life. And then there's stories too, like I told you last year I got really into reading Madame Bovary, which is basically, it's a very, kind of slow book, about, written by Gustave, Flaubert? I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I have never heard it pronounced, but by Gustave. And so, but it's written about, the French countryside in the 1800s, and it has some of the most detailed descriptions of that to give us like a really the future generations a good idea of what's happening there. And so there's a plot about Madame Bovary and depression and being an isolated woman, and it says a lot of things about a lot of things. Some of them, I think all of it is interesting, even the things that I don't necessarily agree with, but it still is, it's just giving you this glimpse into what life was like for people then. And so the thing though is there were more lives written about the Madame Bovary's, the somewhat wealthy, she's the person who hires staff, and there aren't as many books written about the staff because the staff weren't allowed to write as many books. And that's also why I think it's so cool right now, is it is just as easy as it is for, it's not as easy to get published, but the access to write and the tools to get your voice out. And that's kind of why social media and everything is so crazy, because suddenly everyone is clamoring and no one knows who's telling the truth, and stories are like constantly being told and twisted, and we see the tropes that we want to trust, and we want to go with them, and that reinform our own biases, and it becomes like this whole thing. And I know that seems so overwhelming, but I think it is so much better that we have people telling their stories. I think that it's essential that people are allowed to share their stories. And I think that even if you don't think you have something interesting to say, I think you do. And I think that there's a reason that you're drawn to the stories that you're drawn to. And that says something about you. And you can say something else to people, and you can convey information, and you can at least just share. And I think that one of the things that at least with my books, what I try to do, and again, they're not perfect at all, but I think that one of my main goals with them is to give you just a little bit of escape, a little bit of relief from the stress of life, and have things make a little bit more sense. And you know that there's going to be mostly happy ending at the end of it. But also that I want readers to feel seen and validated, and to have their experiences feel validated. Because I do know that there's times where I see characters, and when they talk about how representation matters, and a lot of people are dismissive for it, but a lot of people who are dismissive are the ones who have always been represented. So they don't really know what it's like. And when you see someone and you're like, see you, it can be so moving. I mean, even for me, where it's not even like, I am an upper middle class white woman. I'm not exactly underrepresented, but there's things about me that definitely are. And so it is exciting when I can really, see myself. And so that's what I'm trying to do with my stories. Those are my goals, and they're not perfect, obviously, but I think it's okay that they're not perfect. There's just, there's so many things that I know that I've internalized from the stories that I've heard, and that so many other people have too. And you don't mean to, you don't make these deliberate choices to think these things. Usually they're things that you were just taught to over and over again, the stories repeated over and over again. And so I'm trying to make sure, and that's why I think if you're out there and you're telling your story, and the refrains aren't going to be exactly the same as they used to be. It's not going to be the exact same repetitions. And sure, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to put in new tropes that are harmful for sure. But it's about breaking them down and replacing them, and have them not being the only one. And it's not so overbearing. And right now I do think it's tricky because people are trying to figure out how to weed through all the stories. And sometimes to get heard, people just end up shouting repetition too. And then you get like a whole echo chamber thing, which is also not ideal. And it's hard to figure out exactly how to get this all sorted out. And I don't have an answer for that. And if I did, I would be much smarter than I am. It's a very difficult thing, but I think that it's important work to do. I think that the end tunnel where everyone has a chance to share their story, and to find other people who have similar stories or different stories, and to be able to share experiences, I think is so wonderful. And I think it's something that is just where we should be. And so I think it's worth the work. It's worth the work, honestly. And there's a lot of work to get there, because right now what we're getting is a lot of conspiracy theories and propaganda, which of course propaganda is easier to spread than authentic stories usually, because it's designed to be that way. It's designed to be easily digestible, and yeah, I've gotten really into storytelling, as thinking about it as a thing. It was Jim Henson's The Storyteller, where they said, that was the premise of the show. It was a storyteller sitting around the fireplace, and how they always had the best seat because they had the best people with the best stories had the best seat, because people love to crowd on and hear stories. And definitely, I mean, television and even the written word haven't been around that long, but the spoken word has been around for like thousands of years long. So we've been telling stories a lot longer than we've been able to document the telling of them. So I mean, the mediums and the rules that we have now are actually very, very, very new, but they were common things that were around for, eons. And so that is one of the things that I'm thinking of. And I would love to really, I have some ideas, and I don't know if/when I'll ever get to it, because it's very ambitious, but I would love to really write more of a prehistoric story about learning to tell stories, and I think it would be fun. But again, I don't really know. I don't have a lot. I've got a very little, some bones. But I'm excited about the prospect of doing it, because again, I find the whole concept so fascinating, because other animals aren't able to do it. That they can learn behavior from each other, but they can't tell them the same specifics that they can, the nuance that we can. And it's fascinating, because I think as humans, we've actually lost our ability to understand nuance, or losing it. And it is a thing. It's complicated. It's complicated because language is nothing and it's everything. You know what I mean? You can, saying words takes nothing and it can invoke such strong emotions. And it's just, it's fascinating. It is so fascinating. And I'm always trying to learn more about it, and I definitely don't think that I'm an expert storyteller, but I don't think you have to be an expert storyteller to tell stories. And in fact, Stephanie Perkins, who is fabulous, if you don't know her, she's written Anna and the French Kiss. That series is, I think, her most popular one, but she's also written some fun horror. There's Someone Inside Your House, and then she's got a new one coming out. I think there's something inside the woods. Someone's watching you in the woods. Something like that. I'll post a picture here. So it's this. This is it. But Stephanie Perkins is fabulous, and she posted something the other day about how so many women, especially women, but this is true for people in general. The clip she shared was specifically about women. But with so many women, wait until they're absolutely ready, that they've got everything certain before they try something. And they said, and it was Amy Poehler talking, and she said that men will just jump in before they know everything. They'll come in and be like, yeah, I want to be a writer, let's be a writer, kind of thing. Or I want to be a director, let's start trying here. Where women are like, I have to learn everything about it. And I don't necessarily think that that binary is exactly correct in that men versus women, but I do think there are certain types of people who just go in and they're like, no, I got this, and everyone else just kind of holds back, second guessing themselves. And really, I don't think we should be doing that. I don't think we should be holding ourselves back. I think that we need to be willing to try and have our voices heard, and I think that it's important. And then I mean that for everyone. I think that the more people are heard and they feel heard, the better the world will be. There's a big issue, I think, with people not feeling heard and people not being able to be heard. And I think that being able to get over that hump is going to be huge for humanity if we can get over it. But anyway, I guess that is today's real lesson. Circling back to what I said originally, is that you mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger. And I absolutely, yeah, that's how I'm trying to live my life now. I'm trying to not be afraid to dream bigger and to go forward with my head high and my heart open. And I'm excited about what's to come. I am. I mean, it's hard to be excited about anything in the world right now, but life is still, it's everything can be so, it can be messy and complicated and gross and dirty, but it's also beautiful and wonderful, and all there is, it's all we have, is we have these lives. And I just, I spent so much of my early life being so depressed and so anxious, and I mean, I honestly feel in general happier than I've ever been. I'm consistently happy in my life now in a way that I never was before. And so I think that part of that for me is thinking about how many times that I held myself back, and how many times that through a lack of therapy and bad brain chemistry and other things, because I'm not saying you should blame yourself, and I'm not even blaming myself, but the fact is that I was miserable for a long time, and I don't want to be anymore, and I don't feel bad about that. I mean, I feel bad about bad things in life that I should feel bad about, and I try as much as I can to make life better and to be kind when I can, but obviously I'm not always getting it right. But it's still the only way that I know how to live life. I don't know, maybe I got a little too deep there at the end, but yeah, I've talked for long enough, definitely, because I've just been rambling. I know I'm gonna go back and listen to this video and be like, oh my gosh, you talk so much. I'm back in my office. I'm excited about that. Work is going well. I've got stuff coming, and it's going to be exciting and wonderful. I promise. I hope that wherever you are staying safe and happy and healthy. And if you have a story to tell, I think you should just tell it. Don't hold yourself back, and don't be afraid to dream a little bigger. So, until next time, stay safe, be kind, and happy reading.